I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dean, can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Campion?
Here.
Mr. Dibber?
Here.
Mrs. King? Here. Mr. American?
Here.
Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Mr. Tompkins? Here. Mayor O'Brien?
Here. Statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Pursuant to the requirements of the New Jersey's Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this meeting was included in the annual meeting notice filed in the office of the Borough Clerk, posted on the Borough website and on the bulletin board in the municipal building, published as a legal notice in the Co-Star newspaper and mailed to those requesting notice, and providing payment in accordance with Borough policy. Before we approve the agenda, we are adding one discussion item. It's just regarding our dog walking ordinance and access to recreational land. So we're just going to add that before we approve the agenda. Or if that's okay.
Motion on it?
I don't know. Sure.
I'll make a motion. I'll second it.
All in favor? We'll do a roll call.
So this is the amended agenda.
Yeah, to amend the agenda.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So with that, can we get a motion to approve the
I'll
agenda?
make that motion. Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next, we have approval of the minutes for the March 27, 2017 meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We have no scheduled presentations. We do have two scheduled public hearings. The first one is regarding ordinance number 2017-01, an ordinance to exceed the municipal appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank pursuant to NJSA 3A:4-45.14.
Make the motion.
So this is to open up the public
Yes,
discussion,
sorry.
yes. And did we get a second? Sorry.
Rich, yes.
Yeah. Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
So why don't we start, if anybody on council has any questions about this particular ordinance, now would be time to ask. Jay, would you just give a brief explanation for the public?
Certainly. Under the provisions of the New Jersey cap law, there's a limitation on the appropriations increase from year to year in the budget. This ordinance allows our budget to increase by an amount that goes up to 3.5% over last year's expenditures, and the difference that is not used in the current year is banked and is available for 2 subsequent years of the budget. And essentially, that's what this ordinance is. It allows the banking of whatever amount of appropriation availability is not used in the current year.
Does anybody from the public wish to comment or question this particular ordinance? Seeing no hands, can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Public discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
And now we vote to adopt it.
Make that motion. Second.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
Abstain.
The next ordinance for public hearing is ordinance number 2017-02, and an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Municipal Land Use Regulation, Section 22-606.5-B3 Commercial Zone. If you get a motion to open up the public discussion.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
And this we introduced at the last meeting. This is basically making some minor changes to the wording to bring the ordinance into, I think, the original intent versus the way the words were actually insinuating. So it was just some minor changes about land use. So again, I'll ask the council first if you have any questions, and then we'll open it up to the public to ask. No? Anyone from the public wish to comment or question this one? All right. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll make a motion for that. Okay,
You gotta just go roll call for the closing public comment.
we're doing the accelerated version. My apologies.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Absolutely.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
And then a motion to adopt.
I'll make that motion. I'll second it.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to our public comment section for agenda items. If you wish to speak on any item that's on the agenda, please come forward, state your name and address, and address the chair. Seeing no hands, can I get a motion to close the
Make
public
that
comment
motion.
section?
Second.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
We're closed.
That brings us to the discussion item that we amended onto the agenda. So basically, the reason I brought this forward is our current recreational facility use ordinance states that dog walking is not allowed. It's that simple. I think we have a lot of residents, including myself, for full disclosure, that have a dog that wish to utilize some of these facilities. I think we can find a way to do it to the benefit of people who have dogs and the people who don't have dogs. So I just wanted, the Environmental Commission was nice enough to actually look through our existing ordinance. They put together some suggestions. I'm bringing those suggestions to you now so we can discuss whether or not we wish to make those changes.
Do you want me to come on?
Would you like to get? Go
Yeah.
ahead. Our Environmental Commission chairperson is here, and she would be happy to speak on the changes that were made.
Hi, Cat Kirkland, 564 Atlantic Avenue, on behalf of the Environmental Commission. We've had a number of people actually approach us about this, and currently, our ordinance and our practice are two different things. We have an ordinance that says no dogs allowed on borough property
Yeah.
anywhere.
If you look at section 9.1.5 in the documentation provided, that the version that's striked out there, the walking of dogs is prohibited. That is simply what it says.
Anywhere on borough property,
Yeah.
they're not allowed. The problem is that this has never been enforced, and the borough, over time, has installed mutt mix stations on many of their public facilities. So it sends a mixed message, because if you're not allowed there, why are you being provided with something to clean up after your pet, which is wonderful, and perhaps the answer is that years ago, there is not a pooper scooper law, but there is a pet waste law that was put in as part of the stormwater management regs. So it's a little distanced from the park verbiage that's in there. So there's things are a little bit disjointed. The Environmental Commission was willing to do a sort of a pick up after your dog type of education for people. The problem is you can't educate people to do something correctly when it's not allowed in the first place. And then we're sort of complicit with the non-enforcement and the mixed message. So we looked at other towns, we looked what other people do, we talked to people, and everybody said, yeah, we would love to be able to walk our dogs on borough property. Now, obviously, you have some issues because you have playing fields, you have playgrounds, you have areas that you really don't want the dogs in. So it actually might be easier to say you can walk your dog on borough property except these areas and define, because right now, it's no dogs on borough property, but you see people bring dogs over to the community house playground, you see dogs running on the ball fields, you see, if it's not enforced and it's been let go for so many years, what is the best way, really, to do this? So you have people, we have had people come to Environmental Commission's meeting and say, as long as they put up mutt-mitt stations, could there be one in the little Veterans Park on the corner of Highway 71 and Alair Road? Because the people from Fairway Mews like to walk their dog along Alair Road, and I guess a lot of the people from that area up around Alair Road Park walk along there too. And they wind up their walk when they get to 71, and there's no place to put the bag of dog poop. So if, and everybody says it would be nice to have one of those little containers there with a mutt-mitt station.
But we can't put it in
But you
until we
can't.
make it.
Yeah, but you can't, because technically, so what's, so the Environmental Commission talked about it. Everybody had ideas what to do. We didn't want to say, pick one area and make that the dog area. So for example, if you said you can have dogs on Shore Road between the railroad and Highway 71, that kind of penalizes the people that live up at the other end of town, because do they really want to have to put the dog in the car and drive to the other end of town to walk it when we have facilities at the north end? And the problem, now that the weather's getting nice, my understanding is that Fletcher property is full of dog walkers, even though we have a sign there, and Alair Road Park is full of dog walkers. So, we, the Environmental Commission, kind of did our collective wisdom and came up with what we thought. So now we need the collective wisdom of the governing body to say, do you want to do that? Do you have other ideas? Do you have other input? Because it's kind of out of hand, and it's not being enforced. People want to be able to walk their dogs. They want to be able to walk in their neighborhood. I don't blame them. If I had a dog, I can't put any of my cats on a leash and take them out. But if I had a dog, I'd be going to the park probably. So that is where this came from, and that's why it's before you now. And I certainly would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And let me just say, Kat did mention, this section is in Parks and Recreation, right? There is a section that specifically has our laws for animal control and animal
Pet waste,
and
yeah.
pet waste. And we have laws on the book that establish fines for leaving pet waste anywhere,
Yeah.
not just on borough property. So I
We
mean,
know how
those
much
laws,
those fines are.
I did not bring that with me, but we can get that real quick.
Derek, do you
I don't
know
recall.
the general? Okay, I know that.
I'd just like to make sure it's not like a $10 fine. I think
Oh,
no,
no,
I
I
think
think
it's
it
a
should, but
No,
okay.
it's a couple hundred.
Yeah.
Well, the max
Up
on
to
all
2,000.
those violations is 2,000, so it could go as high as that. You're right.
So I think if you're a repeat offender, probably the first time you get slap on the hand and maybe the
I don't know what
second
the
time.
judge's
Yeah.
take on those things are, but typically that's the way it would work. First time through would be lower, and then it would graduate to a repeat offender.
My point is that it's not addressed in what you see here because it's already addressed.
Elsewhere.
We didn't, we can look at that too and see if that needs to be changed, but I didn't feel that that needed to change as much as
The
just the
pet waste
access.
ordinance actually is relatively new because that came in as part of the stormwater management regs in, 2005, 2006.
Yeah, because that section doesn't specify that you can't walk your dog anywhere,
Yeah.
but this section does.
And I think if you look at the year on that, it's like 1968 maybe.
Okay.
So it hasn't been updated in anybody in living memory. So it might be time, and then you could say, no dogs allowed in the playgrounds, no dogs allowed on playing fields, no dogs allowed in the recycling center or, wherever except for service dogs. So it could be a good opportunity to address where they're not allowed and then get some signage up.
We could probably do that with a town plan. That actually, when they buy their dog license, they get a copy of where they could go.
Well, we had talked at one of the meetings about that, and also, and I had looked into it, you can get those little attachments for the leashes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a
Yeah,
little
just give them out,
plastic,
yeah.
plastic bullet that has X
We
number
and I
of
talked about
bags
it,
in there.
we should tell them,
Yeah, well, you
they get
could,
a license.
they're like $1.29
Yeah.
each for a box of 500. You could give them out as a freebie when the person gets the license the first time, and then if they lose it, they can come back and buy it for whatever it is, so.
I think I've asked you this before, Jake. The licensing fees that we have though are like, is that a state standard? Like, and I know they're really,
They are regulated by
like we
state
don't,
law. I
okay.
believe, were we at the max now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we-
it's like the max is like $15 or something.
Yeah, and I think we raised that in 2010. I
Okay.
think that was raised to the max, so.
I had a question on, there were two parts I was looking at on this. The first was the times that we're saying the parks are open. This is probably a better question for Gary, but I see a lot of parks and playgrounds that say open an hour before dusk or an hour after dawn, and they give timelines, and I'm wondering if we say a hard time on here of when the playgrounds and parks are open, what is our liability to provide appropriate lighting so people aren't in there in the dark when we say it's open?
I don't know about that exactly, but what my thought was, first of all, you want to make sure that what you do in this, if you're going to do this ordinance, is consistent with what's already out there. So it's consistent with the Little League lease, and it's consistent with other things. And you may want somebody to spend a little time to make sure it's consistent and come up with some numbers to fit it in so it makes sense. The other thing that comes to my mind is that Jay might want to check with the JIF to see if they have any recommendations about something like this before we go ahead and do it.
Well, that's why, we had a couple of people ask about a dog park, and that was why we did not go down that road, because the liability on a dog park is astronomical.
I did ask a few people who go to dog parks, and we do it often up off 35 on Church Road and Wall. There's a perfect one to take the dogs and run, and the feedback I had from everybody was, if I put my dogs in the car, I'm going to take them where there's a bunch of dogs so they can interact with other animals.
Yeah,
So.
but the problem with that for the municipality is that if the dogs get in a fight, if one dog bites another dog, if a dog bites an owner, or a dog bites a kid, you really don't want to go down that road. And I think Spring Lake has that issue going on right now with a case, so.
Well, I agree with what you said before. When we spoke about this last time here in this forum, we said we're going to have an ordinance, and I think anybody who's been down there for any game has seen people there with leash dogs, very well behaved. We walk around the corner, people bring their dogs there all the time. I've walked up with my dog to let my son use the restroom while we're walking, and totally unaware because you see stuff to pick up after your dog. You don't think that you don't belong there, so I agree with that.
We already have a leash law. The dog has to be on a 6-foot leash, no more than 6 foot. We already have to pick up after your dog law. So the pet waste is already in place. So the only thing would be to define if you're going to allow the dogs on borough property to say where they're not allowed to go into. Because, as I said, you don't want them on playing fields, you don't want them on playgrounds, you don't want them someplace where, they're going to come in contact with kids, they're going to be running loose, that they shouldn't be running loose anyway. I mean, people should keep them on a lead, so.
Some of the other questions I had were about the lighting and the times and that, but I think, to Gary's point, once we vetted against the agreement with the Little League and other things that are out there, I think a lot of my questions on that will be answered.
And Jay, could you just make a note that checking with the JIF would be a very good idea.
Sure. Just to be clear, distributed to the governing body was the original recommendation from last, I believe it was in November or so, from the
It's like the end of the year, yeah.
Environmental Commission, and at last year's Parks and Recreation Committee had reviewed that, and when the mayor mentioned last week about distributing that information back to the council for discussion, we included the draft ordinance that covered a couple of things in addition to the specifics that had been recommended by the Environmental Commission. Most specifically, one of the issues that had been a question mark last year was that the existing language talked about the regulations for parks apply to Allaire Road Park, the Little League Complex, and Ocean Road Park, which we of course all know as Bicentennial Park. And it referenced that any other areas designated as borough parkland, which sort of left a huge wide opening as to what is or is not designated as parkland. So what has been suggested language is to clarify that by listing very specific parks, as well as the parking areas. That was one of the other questions that has been somewhat lingering out there, is whether the park closure times apply to the parking areas as well. So that information has been specifically delineated here with a couple of question marks, because frankly, Black Creek Park, the Freedom Park area, and then the shoreline along Wreck Pond is not officially designated in this ordinance as a park. So there's always the question, well, what regulations do or do not apply? The other point that was made is that as far as the balance of this existing section of our code also covers various activities that the language has been suggested, just to bring it a little bit up to date. And then getting to Councilman Campion's point about the lighting. We have also referenced what has become somewhat of an annual adjustment to determine when the lights are actually shut off and permitted to be on. So that language has been included here based on the most recent adjustment, which had the ball field lighting go to November 30th. I think for those that were present previously, that had traditionally, in the past few years, been a cutoff time of the second Sunday in November when daylight savings time came. And I think for those who were here last year, there was some discussion about extending that. So there are still a couple of items that have gone back and forth over the past few years that the council may wish to nail down as far as any change to the ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to open up this ordinance, I mean, we've already opened up the discussion, we might as well fix, if we cannot come to a consensus on the dogs, we should fix these other things. I mean, there's another one that's an opportunity for, I know the governing body has several times discussed the community center fees. That's listed in this particular ordinance. If we're going to open up this ordinance and vote up, and for public discussion and for changes, then maybe now might be the time to address that as well.
I agree that should be changed. I also, when you said before about going November 30th like we did last year, I agree with that contingent that we were going to make some changes to how the lighting worked, and that was never done. So I don't agree with keeping it the 30th. I think it needs to go back to where it was unless we're going to do that with the lights.
Do anybody have any more dog questions? You guys can duke it out on the rest of this stuff. I'm only here for the dogs.
The last comment I'm going to make on here was to change the parking in those areas.
Thank you.
Prohibited at all times unless authorized by a borough council resolution. That's trading one problem for another, because during snow emergencies when we're clearing roads, we're telling people to park in the parking lots, but then here we're going to say we have to have a meeting to pass a resolution before a snowstorm to let them park there.
So maybe,
Well, I think one of the
Of course,
things we might also
emergency.
do is get some input from the chief about how he'd like to handle some of those things.
yeah, because that one could probably just be by the police decree or something, that the chief could say that we are authorizing overnight parking now because of the snow.
Or
As
just
opposed
put
to-
it right in the ordinance.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you prohibit
Or-
parking on the
yeah.
street because of snow, you automatically activate parking in the parking lot.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it could be written like that, so that we don't have to have a vote, like you said.
That was all I had. I think once we see the coordination with the other items that are out there and we get feedback from the GIF, we can have a little more detailed discussion hammering it down.
Let
I mean,
me,
sorry, go ahead.
let me ask a question. Would it be better for us to brainstorm on this that we've got right now, and then come back and decide to open up this issue when we have?
Yeah, I don't
Other
think we need to, I
viewpoints?
don't think we're ready to act.
I don't
on
think
it.
we need to
I
act
think it
on it
sounds like
tonight.
we've got some ideas and some thoughts that we made.
Because I don't think like.
Too many changes that we're gonna be able to do on the fly
Where
here.
the parking is concerned, because we
Right.
mentioned the community center is not a park.
No,
It has a parking lot. So I think that needs to be delineated as well.
Right.
In terms of what's not parking. And absolutely the fee has to be increased.
Mayor, if I could just interject, the community center is listed as a non-overnight parking location without approval in status of emergency. And also from an enforcement standpoint, the way the ordinance reads is at dusk, the parks are considered closed from an enforcement standpoint. And that, at that point, gives us the authority to then investigate people in the parks after dusk, despite the fact that the lights are on, in particular at the Ocean Road Park, for the basketball and
Yeah.
tennis courts. The way the ordinance currently reads is that it's closed, and people should not be in the park at that point.
So that should be clarified.
It should.
Thanks.
One of the things we're in the process of right now is Ocean Park, by Centennial Park. We're changing the lighting around somewhat. The lights will come on at a certain time, there'll be a button there for them to hit. They will come on for an hour and then shut down. And after 9 o'clock at night, they won't be able to turn it on. But they'll only come on for an hour and then automatically shut off. And if they want, if they want another half hour, they hit the button again. But, at 9 o'clock, that's it.
Yeah, that fee has been issued with the worst one, and the intention for that was rainy days, nobody's playing tennis, and we're lighting.
Yeah. There's nobody there.
So why don't we give it, if you have any more questions, go ahead and ask them. If not, why don't we try to get all of our suggestions and or ideas about this ordinance into Jay by next meeting, and we'll try to see if we can finish up the discussion at the next meeting when we have an ordinance that probably is more of a consensus. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, thank you then. I'll close the discussion on that then. That brings us to our mayor and council reports. I'll start with Councilman Gibbon on the right-hand side.
Budget will be coming up at the next meeting. Of course, tonight we have the ordinance introduction for the bond anticipation notes. Outside that, we have nothing further to report.
Councilman Campion?
Following up on the last meeting when we discussed about the municipal energy audit, there was some feedback that came over about 6:30 this evening. Mr. May has a couple follow-up questions from the state on that. He's going to resolve that this week, and we'll keep the wheels turning. That's it.
Okay, Councilman Schuler?
The new truck that we bought in November, it's dry. Took a little while to get it, but
It wasn't pushed in, right, like she was driven? Just
You bought it in November?
in November. But with the different requirements on
It
it.
was a custom order? Yeah.
But it's here for use.
which vehicle is that?
This dump truck,
Oh, the utility, that's, yeah, so it had to have the work done on it to make it a utility and plow and all the other stuff, got it.
Right.
I don't
That's
have,
all I
Okay.
got.
I don't have anything.
I was gonna announce a new truck arrived today.
Oh.
So they
I just want to mention that hydrant flushing is starting next week.
Okay. Where is it starting and which day? Do you have that?
It starts next Monday night.
Okay.
It begins up on Old Mill Road and works that southwest quadrant. Then we slowly move southeast, then back up. It goes back and forth. It's a kind of detailed plan, but during the day we'll be doing valve exercising
Okay.
and night hydrant flushing.
All right. So just watch your, try not to do wash your whites.
What time are you gonna start that at night, Joe?
So we'll be putting out a reverse
Yeah.
reminder.
So that everybody knows when,
What time do they start flowing?
About 8 o'clock.
okay.
So I have a couple things. One, do we get bids back on the community center yet? I just wanna get an update on
I
that.
may as well give you the update on that.
Was that a different section of
No,
the?
that's all right. I have a couple of bid announcements to make. First, as far as the community center, they are out to bid. We, as part of that process, because it did include the CDBG funding, the plans and specs need to be reviewed by them. That process took longer than we expected, but the bids are out with a return date of May 4th
Okay.
for the community center bid. We're also out to bid on the cell tower lease bids, and those are due April 26th. And we are also out to bid for the assessment inspection RFPs,
Yeah.
and that is April 27th.
That was done with the last 2 years plus?
The last 2 years with an option to extend.
Perfect, that's what I was looking for.
Also, next month is our paint the
Can we
town.
do,
What?
Mr. Tompkins?
No, I thought that's what you said, right?
I
Okay, I
missed
didn't
it,
just
I'm
skip
sorry.
over you, did I? Sorry if I did.
No worries.
I couldn't hear that, sorry.
We, last year, Janine spearheaded a Paint the Town Pink event. I mean, you probably noticed if you were in town last year how much we had a big sign out in front of the school. The borough guys got behind and put pink up everywhere. And in conjunction with that, this year we've got a couple of things going on, right? First of all, the Spring Lake Heights School is going to help painting the town pink by selling pink light bulbs. So if you want to light up your house pink for $5, the school store will help Spring Lake Heights paint the town pink. And you can get more information on that at paintthetownpink.com/pinkfund. If you need that information, please come up to me and I'll show you the address. Or talk to somebody from the school and they can point you to that. Contact the office and we'll give you the link, we'll email it to you, whatever you want. Or we'll just let you buy your light bulb. And then, what was the other thing? The May 24th, right, is the,
May 9th.
May 9th is going to be the pink event. Last year there was, we had a couple doctors into the community center to talk about some issues, and
They're
we
going to
don't,
be present this year, but in all likelihood at Fairway News this year.
okay.
But we are all invited, and we're going to do the same thing. I'll put something out, more details are to follow, but we'll just ask that you call and register just so we have a head count.
That'll be May 9th.
Back to the light bulbs, though, they are selling them through the school store, which anyone who has a student in the school will get information, I think, in your Friday packet. But for those who don't have children in school, on April 24th, our next council meeting, we will have them here to purchase as well.
There you go.
Janine, did you want to mention about the DPW guys too?
Oh, no, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Very in support of this, Recreation is buying, our Recreation Trust Fund is buying pink T-shirts that the DPW guys will be wearing the month of May in support of this event as well. So.
Same t-shirt for the whole month?
Yeah.
But no, they're getting 2 weeks, and we're going to designate 2 days of the week that they will all wear it on those.
Okay,
those
good.
2 days, just in support of that. So thank you, Mr. Compey, for that.
And then the final thing I had was, a couple of weeks ago, we had Courtney Middleton in. He turned 100 years old. He's been a resident of town for like 60 years, and he sends us a really nice thank you note. And I just wanted to, once again, say that it was great to have him, and somebody who's been living in the town for that long, and that he was able to stop by, and we were able to throw him a little birthday party. So that was nice. You all got a copy of it up on the dais. Go ahead, you had a question?
Jay, on the assessment demonstration, on the assessment program for going out to bid on that, one of the complaints we had when the county came here was that nobody was interested and we got what we were stuck with. They mentioned that there were other people that they would give us a list on. Have we gotten that, and have we contacted them to let them know we're out to bid?
We have received the list. I think the last meeting I reported, I had a meeting scheduled with the representative from the county tax board. That took place, I believe it was the day or two after our last meeting. We have the list, and they will be included automatically on the solicitation.
So they'll get a formal letter from us or notification of solicitation?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe
More than one.
So it's not just going to be published in a website hoping, so we're directly reaching out?
That's right. I believe there are 8 companies, or 8 firms that are approved for this type of work and revaluation and assessments at the state level.
Thank you.
If we get close to the end and we haven't seen anybody else come in, I'd like to see phone calls made to everybody on the list to confirm that they received the package. All we need to know is that they have it. So.
All right. That brings us to our reports, notices, and correspondences. We have in your packet the monthly police report for March of 2017, the municipal court report for March of 2017. There is a Borough of Spring Lake public hearing April 25th in regard to Ordinance 2017-002, amending the Chapter 225, Section 25, Signs and Awnings. There's a letter from the Board of Chosen Freeholders of Monmouth County dated March 24th regarding the resolution authorizing one-time payment to aid the joint municipal group opposition to the JCP&L reliability project. And there's a letter from the Spring Lake Heights Board of Adjustment as per NJSA 40:55D-70.1 reported the board's review of the 2017 decisions. That brings us to our ordinance introduction. Last meeting, I think it was, we had 2 ordinances that we talked about, and now we are going to introduce them. The first one is ordinance number 2017-03. This is a bond ordinance of the Borough of Spring Lake Heights in the County of Monmouth, New Jersey, to provide for various capital improvements and other related expenses for the borough and appropriating $670,000 for providing the issuance of $636,000 in bond notes of the Borough of Spring Lake Heights to the finance the same. And that is specifically, we spoke last meeting about some road improvements that were unexpected, specifically Wall Road. Half of it got torn up. Half of it's going to be repaved. Doesn't make any sense to only pave half the road, so we're going to pay for the other half to get paved. And then we also realized in our capital improvement fund that we probably would not be able to act quick enough before some of our equipment broke down and we were unable to use it. So we are going to act quicker by borrowing that money and getting some of that equipment. So that's specifically what that money is being planned for. So this is the initial introduction. This is not us passing the ordinance.
Make the motion introduced.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Diver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Motion passes, so we will have our public hearing at our next meeting,
Yeah.
April 24th.
So once again, if you wish to comment on that, we will have it at our next meeting, just like we did those first 2 ordinances of the day. You get to state your piece about that. The next ordinance is to introduce is ordinance number 2017-04, an ordinance authorizing various water sewer utility capital improvements and appropriating $250,000 from the existing utility capital fund balances and reserves. Chris, do you want to speak about that? Or?
I'll make the motion to introduce it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
It was just for maintenance of.
Yeah, it's specifically, I mean, we've got some sewer lines that need replacing, right? And some other, no, it's not sewer lines?
No, it is.
Oh, okay. You were shaking your head, no.
No.
I wasn't shaking my
I'll
head.
give you a detailed rundown. As we've discussed, there's miles upon miles of pipe in the ground with an average age of about 60 or 80 years old.
The 3 pumps are Beverly Lane, Sewer, and the Orchard Wall.
Okay, so this is,
Right.
yeah, this is not actually borrowing any money, it's spending money that we already have saved, basically. So, that's for $250,000. I think whenever we spend that sort of money, it's worth explaining what we're going to do with that sort of money.
Whenever we spend any money, we should spend it.
It's worth the explanation. So that's ordinance number 2017-04. Can I get it? Oh, Chris already motioned to introduce it.
A second.
I have Mr.
I think
Merrick
Robert
as a
said
second.
Okay, sorry.
So I
Roll call,
just-
please.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Diver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tomby?
Yes.
So this too will be a
On the same
public
meeting?
hearing
Okay.
on April 24th.
Great, thank you. That brings us to our resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution R 2017-71. And that is a resolution authorizing the emergency temporary appropriation pending the adoption of the municipal budget for the year 2017, which we introduced but haven't adopted yet.
And Mayor, just, this is more of a housekeeping matter. These are termed emergency temporary appropriations by title. That infers that once this resolution is adopted, the governing body is committing to include these in our budget. Our budget has been introduced, but this is incidentally related to the bond ordinance that provides the necessary down payment, as well as the reserve for the utility improvements that have just been mentioned. So these are all related to the adoption of the budget and moving ahead on the capital programs and projects that were mentioned as part of the budget introduction.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion for that?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Diver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tomby?
Abstain.
The next is Resolution R 2017-72, a resolution of the Borough Council authorizing the contract for professional services with Davidson, Eastman, Munoz, Littman, and Teon, PA, for bond council legal services, which we will need to get their bond.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Divver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompi?
Yes.
Motion
The next,
passes.
thank you. The next resolution is resolution number R 2017-73, a resolution of the Borough Council authorizing the release of designated escrow deposits.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Divver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next is resolution number R 2017-74, a resolution of the Borough Council appointing Kevin Thompson as recycling coordinator for the term expiring December 31st, 2017.
Motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Divver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next is resolution number R 2017-75, a resolution of the Borough Council authorizing submission of the 2016 recycling tonnage grant application.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Divver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And the final resolution is resolution R 2017-76, a resolution of the Borough Council approving payment of the itemized claims as set forth on the April 6, 2017 bill list.
I made that motion.
Second.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Divver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tompi?
Abstain.
Motion passes.
What did you show me? Oh, this is one of the ordinances that we spoke about in the public hearing. That brings us to our public comment section. In this section, you can speak about anything whatsoever. If you have something to say, please state your name and address, go to the bench and speak to us.
Hi, John Angelo, 564 Atlantic Avenue. I'm also a member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and I see you received a letter from the Zoning Board of Adjustments in the package. And part of it is is the board asking you to review the zoning concerning garages. Okay?
Okay.
I want to kind of explain what this was about.
Okay.
Okay. Right now, there's no definition of what a garage is. The land use law says that you can have a garage, a detached garage on your property, and another accessory building. So an accessory building is usually a shed. So people have a detached garage and they have a shed. Okay. But recently, someone came to the board and they had built a small building on their property and called it a garage. And a garage is allowed to be 600 square feet with a height of 15 feet. But they called it a garage, but it didn't have access to it. A vehicle couldn't get into it. It didn't have a garage door. It wasn't able to store a car. So it really wasn't a garage. Okay? So what they had done, in fact, was build a little building and called it a garage. So the board thought it would be good that if in the ordinance it would say what a garage is, that a garage needs access for a vehicle to have access to it, and it should be able to be used to store vehicles. Not that you have to store a vehicle in it, but if it's a garage, it should
Have a garage door.
be a garage. Okay, so I was wondering if you can discuss that at some later date and review that ordinance. Maybe Gary take a look at the ordinance, because there's really no definition.
And there's not like a statewide standard for what a garage is.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there
Off the
is.
top of my head, I don't.
I mean, if there is, then that kind
So
of.
you shouldn't be able to build a cabana.
No, I agree. No, I agree. I think it makes sense.
But doesn't the Board of Adjustment have to recommend?
That's what
That's what this document
That's what
is.
we're recommending.
They have one, okay.
Yeah, that's what, this came up. So in that particular case, we decided to, the building was already built, so we said, okay, for the purposes, this is your garage now. So you can't now go and build another garage on
That actually,
the property.
you can put your car in.
But in the future, it would be nice that if people were going to build garages, they would garage.
Yeah, I think we can put that on the agenda and discuss it. Thank you, John.
After the crisis for Atlantic Avenue, I just wanted to bring to your attention something that is a potential environmental problem, but it's also something that impacts my neighbors and I personally, and that is at the DPW garage on Atlantic Avenue. there is an area along the side of the building that faces the residences on Atlantic Avenue. And historically, that's been used to store defunct vehicles. And we've had garbage trucks up there, we've had dump trucks up there, we have all kinds of things up there. And they attract varmints. Trees grow up through the engines, they sat there for quite a long time. Jay addressed this, and he had I guess it was a used equipment auction or something, where all of that stuff was finally pulled out of there and sold off, and it was cleaned up. And it was great, because all the neighbors on the street, especially during the winter, they can see all that stuff. And if you or I had a junked car in your backyard, you know the zoning guy would be coming to pay you a call on a regular basis to get it out of there. So the borough needs to be a good neighbor. I noticed tonight that we now have, I think it's 4 old police cars, 2 the mega haulers are up there, the old speed limit sign that the cops used to pull out on the trailer, a couple of police trailers, the old trailer that used to be parked back here that had equipment in it and stuff. So, that just, it's bad for the neighborhood because it just looks terrible, terrible. And as I said, the stuff leaks. You have various fluids that come out of those vehicles. The varmints get in there because then it's a nice cozy place for them to live. The weeds grow up, the ticks get in there, it's a mess. So if somebody could please take a look at that and maybe turn it into some money. I mean, if those cars are junked and they're not good for anything anymore, sell them for scrap, get some money. And then you don't have to come get it out of my pocket all the time. So thank you, I just want to make you aware of it.
Thank you.
Eileen Number 1213 Pond Road. I just wanted to let you know that as chair of the planning board, we have established a committee and we're working on a number of ordinances that we feel need to be addressed and changed, so the things that have come up over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And the garage issue is that whole accessory building that we're addressing. So, in fact, I had gotten information about what John was saying, so we are looking into putting some sort of wording in that.
Good.
Well, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be coming forward with some of these changes. So if any of you have any land use ordinances that you would like to address or like to see us address, let us know.
All right, thank you.
Mato, 1719 Beverly Avenue. Now, this spring is here, and the days are getting longer. I wanted to talk about the noise ordinance. Perhaps, I don't know when it was written, but perhaps it's time to adjust it, specifically in terms of landscaping noise, whether it be landscapers or property owners. I think 8 o'clock is just much too late. I know that Spring Lake has recently adjusted theirs, I think, on Saturdays. I'm not going to specifics. But it's just getting impossible. First of all, everybody's got a landscaper now, and they all have leaf blowers. And just today, it sounded like there were 3 of them over here on Brighton Lane, and the guy was blowing stuff into the street. When my neighbor has her yard done, there'll be 3 guys out there with the leaf blowers. If I happen to be home, I can smell the fumes from the gas seeping into our house. Plus the fact that, you want to relax, it's a quality of life issue. And there's these leaf blowers going off. There's a guy on my street who's out there every single night. I don't know what he's trimming and blowing because he's out there all the time. Last night he was using it past 8 o'clock. And I'm not going to go over there and start something with him.
You don't have to, you can call the police and ask if they
Well,
take care of it.
but I don't want to call the police. I just think, I will if it continues, but I just think that 8 o'clock is really too late, especially on a Saturday. I don't understand why the cutoff can't be 6 o'clock, because it's just this constant buzz all the time, and you don't get to sit outside, enjoy the fireflies, enjoy your porch, you know, have a nice meal on your porch at night, watch the sun go down or whatever, because there's this constant buzz. Plus the fact that it's not good for the environment. It's not good for the air that I'm breathing if I smell this stuff all the time. And I don't know, maybe it's something for the Environmental Commission, but I think maybe it's time to look at it because times have changed. And there's just, you know, it's a lot noisier than raking, which I do. And you know, it's just, if I'm smelling it from the outside into my own home, that's intrusive. So I was just wondering if perhaps there could be a study, somebody look at that and just.
We can definitely look into that. I mean, I guess 2 questions for you, Jay. One, do landscapers have to register with our town at all? I mean, landscapers have to have a state license if they use any pesticides, but do they have to be licensed in any other way?
I don't believe that we have a local landscape registration, and if memory serves me, I want to say 4 years ago, there was a review of the time limit aspect of landscaping work. As I know there were some adjustments made at that time, the specifics I don't recall, but I can double check that and report back.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I used to actually work from home, and in the middle of the day in the summertime, I could not work with the windows open because of the amount of landscaping work that would go on my street on a regular basis. And certainly on a Saturday at 8 o'clock, that does seem excessive to have a professional landscaper at your house. Like, they should be able to.
Well, we don't allow professional landscapers on the weekends.
Yeah.
But it's not just the landscapers. I mean, as I
Yeah.
said, this has been going on for years with the dude that lives down the street from me, and he's
Because
actually.
you could still be, your neighbor could be using a power washer at 8 o'clock or at 7:30 at night on a Saturday, yeah, which is even louder than it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at it.
But we don't allow landscaping on
Okay, so,
But
yeah,
it's
not on
not
the
just the
weekend.
landscape.
No,
it. No, it's individual homeowners.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
And I live across from that condo on Beverly Avenue. It's got a yard the size of a postage stamp. When those guys drive up, literally once there were 3 guys with their blowers, and I don't know what they were doing because the yard's this big. But you know, it's not just the landscapers, it's the homeowners, you know, just think 8 o'clock is just, in the summertime, you know, we're allowed to hang out on our porches
Well,
and have some peace of
We
mind.
already have a noise ordinance that allows for a certain decibel level for anything.
It's a,
Yeah, but
no, we
it's not
don't.
just, it's not just the decibel level now with all these new toys that people have, it's the fumes. I mean, it's not good for anybody, and I just think that 8 o'clock is a little too late.
Unfortunately, there's some people that don't get home from work until 6 o'clock. If they're gonna work on their yards, they don't have much time if you shut it off at 6.
What about Saturday? I think 8 o'clock on Saturday is kind of ridiculous. I don't know, it's just, you know, most people
Yeah.
have Saturdays
I'm just
off.
thinking maybe there are ways that we can encourage them to use quieter equipment.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know.
good luck with that. I just think
No,
that, you know,
I-
you can have it on paper and just say.
As long as you let them do it, they're going to use the thing that's easiest unless we find a method to, you know, help them be quiet. But yeah, we can definitely look into it. I think it's,
And maybe the Environmental Commission can look into it, because, you know, it's just, I keep forgetting to bring it up year after year, as soon as the weather's nice and, you know, you get all settled down on your porch and there the guy goes on the street, and, you know.
Kat, would you be willing to?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, a couple of years ago, we did propose a landscaper ordinance, and it met with some resistance of people that were on the council at the time, so maybe the time is better to bring it back and let you all revisit it. Also, in regards to the noise ordinance, this is something that a couple of our members had actually wanted to look into as well. We do not, in the local ordinance, specify the decibel level, but because we don't have it locally, we then revert over to the county health ordinance for the decibel level. So it certainly would be to our benefit to beef up what we have at a local level, because it's easier to enforce.
Yeah, it's.
And in fact, if there's complaints, the county has a machine
that registers the decibel level. So if there's ever a question, you can call them and they come out. But, you know, it's much easier to start it on a local level. So we can definitely look at that. We'll bring back the landscaper ordinance. So legislation grants, we can liaise with you.
Do you recall what the friction points were? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't remember, and I don't want to
Because
quote
when you talk
someone.
about a local registration for landscapers, I would be strongly opposed to that. I think there's enough legislation.
I'm not saying
It's-
that, I just was wondering if there was one already in place. No.
But if that was one of the friction points, I just
Yeah.
want to make it known now before we.
No, and actually, basically, it was just that a landscaper doing work in the town would need to register that he or she would be working here. They would get a sticker, so if they're working on a resident's property, they could take the brush and drop the brush off, so we don't have the landscapers from Manasquan filling the brush bin on Saturday, which always used to happen. But they would also have to sign something to say that they read and understood our stormwater management ordinance that forbids things like blowing in the street. And because you see these guys out there on the road blowing the stuff down the stormwater drain all the time. It's not allowed. And also they would have to understand about the noise, what time they could, so you don't have people like the people across the street from me that start at 7 in the morning revving up engines. Can't do it.
But I think that's back to what you said before. I know you don't want to call on your neighbors. We all want to be good neighbors. But if they're consistently disrespecting you by violating the rules, you have to call and let the officers go and document it.
But
They
some
have
of
to
these
build a
rules
list.
aren't in
No,
place.
some of these rules we have to, we should look at to make sure that they're clear enough that our officers can enforce what we have to.
They are allowed at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Isn't that a golf course though?
You're allowed at 7 a.m.
I just read that.
Just a second, let me finish.
I thought it was 8
I
o'clock.
was 8 o'clock.
I think on the weekend, in some spots, if I'm not incorrect, I think the last time this was done, it was 7 a.m. And if I'm not incorrect, they have to stop on a weekend. They're supposed to stop by 6 p.m.
On Sunday it's 4.
Right, I know on the weekends it's shorter, so if someone's out on a weekend, it's 8 o'clock and they're doing this, you gotta call the police.
And that stuff's allowed on Sunday as well?
Well, you have people that work.
I
You know,
know,
people have to
I
be able
work.
to, right,
I
but
know.
people need to be able to take care of their body, people work on weekends, so it's.
I know, but and also it's not just landscaping lately, it's also construction noises. I mean, do they get to go until 8 o'clock and work when it's dark? I mean,
I think the
you know,
same.
it's a noise ordinance, I just think it's a little
Unfortunately,
loosey-goosey. and-
construction is until 8 o'clock
Right,
during the week. But they can't begin before 8.
right.
We should defer it to environmental, let them investigate.
Yeah, I think we need to investigate it, find out where we may not be able to easily enforce it because the laws aren't clear, and we'll go from there.
Right,
Find if
and-
there's some, you
And
know,
I
room
defer to
for
Mr.
improvement.
Diver, I did read through the ordinances, I didn't realize that landscaping was all right at 7 o'clock in the morning with machinery.
I think it is. I don't remember exactly, but I think it may be.
There's amendments to ordinance.
Mhm. Yeah, I distinctly remember something to that effect.
Well, whatever you guys can do, because it's just getting to be too much year after year after year. You know,
Thank
it's all
you.
a life issue here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, just as a point of reference, if a citizen or a resident doesn't want to have police involvement, it's within their authority to write and sign a borough ordinance complaint against the violator themselves if they don't want us to get involved. So that's always an avenue for them as well.
All right,
I
thank
mean,
you.
I wouldn't mind, I just hate bothering you guys.
That's okay.
Perhaps to your point, Tom, maybe you do more restrictive for gasoline-fired appliances and give a little latitude for electrical or alternate fuel.
That's what I'm saying, is there a way to encourage that, right?
Yeah.
Because I own a couple of electrical appliances, and I can tell you they are, you know, I can have a conversation while I'm running my lawnmower.
Well, that's what I was referencing
Yeah.
last year, when we're cutting grass, talking over the
Yeah.
fence to make sure we're all cutting grass.
So, anyway, is
We'll
there
look.
any other comments from the public? Then can I get a motion to
I'll
close
make that
the
motion.
public?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Campion?
Yes.
Mr. Diver?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. American?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tomke?
Yes.
That brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I
I'll
get
make a motion to adjourn.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, see ya.
You got a head, Joe?